What are you dirty? It's fine. You don't need to wash. Hello,
It's good. It's
everybody.
good. Hello,
Um,
hello.
I'm here today, whatever time it is for you guys, with the wonderful Raven's Dagger. So, Raven's Dagger, as you can see here, is the author of Stray Cat Strut and a bunch of other books as well. But I
A few
found him
others.
I found you through Stray Cat Strut, which I've been talking about in the group quite a little bit
Oh, that's
because
good.
it's
Thank
so
you.
no, it's bloody good. That's why I've been talking about it in the group because I found it on. I heard about it on Royal Road. I found it on Amazon, bought it on Amazon, started reading it there, and then I was like, "This is really, really good." So I read the first couple, and yeah, I had to reach out to you, dude.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. But
Nick?
yeah. Oh, I see. Was that a tail?
Oh, was that what?
Was
Yes,
that?
that was a tail. So I have a wife, so there's 2 adult humans in the house, 2 small humans, 2 cats, 2 dogs, and some fish. So
You
I've
have
got
a whole
2 of everything
menagerie.
basically. And what you'll see is throughout every time I do these lives, at some point, the cat has to show her ass on screen.
Cats know.
Yeah,
They're like, you're focusing on something. I have to step in and just get it
She
away.
she pays no attention whatsoever. Will not come and play, and then you're live. I need to show the world my ass. Lars?
It's fantastic. Oh, that's very typical of cats, though.
They're I'd say they're wonderful creatures, but they're not. They're horrible little shits.
Oh, we love them.
There we do.
Yeah,
Hello,
yeah.
Facebook user.
Hello,
For
hello.
anybody that is just joining us, if you haven't used StreamYard before or lately, when you first join the group, you need to, at the very top of this stream, there should be something about StreamYard that basically says click here to let Facebook and StreamYard work together. And it means that then we'll see your identity rather than just Facebook user. So
If you want a name other than Facebook user.
Or just put your name in your sort of post. That'll work as well.
That works too.
Now, before we get started, hello again, Facebook user. Before we get started, I will just quickly say, a short while ago, a big member of our community on Facebook and in the Lit RPG groups, Daniel Stratton, died, unfortunately.
Oh.
It's Richard, you puff tart. Fuck off, Richard. It's his funeral today.
Really?
Hello, Marianopolis. So, raise a glass to Richard, and in my case, raise a bottle that raise a glass to Daniel, and this is a bottle that Richard sent me today. So, cheers, Daniel, to your memory, son.
Did you know? Do you know him well?
Just in the groups, but
just in the groups.
He was somebody that interacted a lot and always had something good to add to everybody. So it was a real loss to the group, and we're all missing him. So,
cheers.
Neat, just with ice. Yeah, thanks, Richard. Well, yeah, that's got a little kick. That's definitely going to hit the spot. So, let's talk to you. I mean, the whole plan wasn't just to start with Daniel, but when I found out it was his funeral today, we really had to give a nod to him. So, come on, tell me all about yourself, then, Raven.
Oh,
should we call you Raven's Dagger? Should we call you Raven? Should we call you
Raven's Dagger? Whichever one pleases you right now. I don't mind either way.
Yeah.
But yeah, where do you want me to start?
Well, just
origins or.
Yeah, start with the origins. Start with anything you want to tell us, really.
My supervillain origin story? No, it's nothing that complicated. I've been writing for, I think it's approaching 10 years now. I'm 30 years old. I published my first book when I was 19. Please don't do any efforts to dig that up or read it or interact with that at all. I've hopefully buried any leads to it. It's really bad. It was kind of awful. But yeah, I've always loved reading and writing, of course, and I've been trying and experimenting with different things for quite a while. In the last 4 or 5 years or so, I started getting a little bit luckier. A couple of my books did all right, and then I was able to shift from doing work to be able to writing full time, and kind of here that's what led me to where I am now. So I got quite lucky. Most of my books are on the kind of free to read model on Royal Road, on Space Battles, and different sites like that. So that's where I kind of made my little niche, my audience is all kind of there.
Yeah.
The Straight Cajiao. Oh, thank you. But
It's
yeah,
a bloody good series. You should. Yeah.
thank you.
So, what have obviously I've not really come across your other books. I've seen that they're advertised on there. I just haven't had time. It's one of those things that because we write, you have very little time to read.
That's true.
So
I don't blame you for that.
When you look at your stories, which is your favorite?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think I have like 20 something different series, but my favorite, hands down, is probably Heart of Darkness, which is a very strange one. It didn't do that well in terms of sales, or actually haven't published it on Amazon at all. It's still just on Royal Road. I've been editing it slowly, getting it ready, cutting some chunks out, and eventually I'll post it on Amazon one of these days. But in terms of like a story that I'm really proud of like the plot, the characters, the world building, and everything, I really pushed myself hard for that one. It was relatively difficult to write, but it's the one that I'd say I'm most proud of having done it. It's not the one that made the most sales. I don't know if you subscribe to the one for me, one for thee method.
No.
What
do you mean better?
All right, so I write a lot of books. Like right now, I think I'm writing. Thank you, Roll. Yeah. So right now, I think I'm writing 6 at the same time.
Jesus.
Which is down from like 8. So I'm taking like half day off a week now. But yeah, so what I usually do is I know that my audience will like certain things.
Yeah.
I'm more or less in touch with Royal Road as an audience and Patreon and so on. So what I usually do is I'll write one story specifically for that audience, and I'll write one story just for me. So the stories that tend to not do really well are the ones that, I just felt like, hey, I have this cool idea. I have this wild thing. I know it's not going to do well financially. It's going to flop. I know from the moment I start writing it, it's too niche. It's too bizarre. It's not to market. But I write them anyway. And oftentimes they're great practice. They let you try new things. And yeah, I enjoy writing those. The rest of the books, I'll generally sit down before I start writing them, and I'll look at the market. I'll see, okay, this is getting popular, that's getting popular. I'll try to aim more specifically in like genres and styles that people will enjoy, and then I'll write that. Straight Cat Strut is something like that, for example, where I sat down for. I still enjoy writing Straight Cat Strut. It's still the blast to write. Bless you. But yeah, so Straight Cat Strut, I sat down for. It took me a good couple weeks before I really got it down. And I sat down and I was like, okay, I want something with a system. I want something that's a little RPG. And at the time, Cyberpunk 2077 was about to release. About 6 months before release. And the hype for that was really high. So I was like, there's a big hype for cyberpunk stories. It's a genre that I've always loved. I read Snow Crash as a teenager. I read it again as an adult. I love Neuromancer. I loved a lot of those classic cyberpunk stories. So I was like, okay, I know that genre. It might have a resurgence right now. So I'm going to write something in that genre specifically because I think the market will like that. And that turned out to be more or less correct. So Stray Cat Shut did fairly well. So yeah, that's the type of story where I sat down and specifically wrote big parts of the story specifically because I know that this is what the broader audience will enjoy reading.
So with that, when you're saying you've got like 6 books on the go at the moment, how long will it take you to finish those?
I write on average something like 14 to 15 chapters a week. So that's about 2 chapters per book per week, 8 chapters a month per book. The book is about 60 chapters, so 7-8 months per book. The fastest I've ever gone from nothing to a completed book was Formageddon Book 1. That one was, I can't remember the start date. It was the 16th, and I finished it on the 16th of March. So go back 3 months. It was exactly 90 days from the time I wrote down the first word to the time it was published on Amazon.
Wow.
So
including your like editing cycle.
Yes, yeah. So that was me pushing myself to go as fast as I could.
Yeah.
Which is like that wasn't a 2-chapter a week book, though. That was a chapter a day book for the first 2.5 months or so. So
very true there.
That was, yeah, that is a good Facebook user. Oh, and wait, okay.
So how do you do your editing? What's your process for editing?
Oh God, it is awful. So I write my rough draft. I write all my writing live. So it's all on my Patreon, on my Discord. So every time I write a chapter, I tell people, hey, today we're working on this story, this chapter of that story. A couple people will join in my Gdoc, just like they have access to it. And I'll just write the chapter down normally. Then I tell people, hey, the chapter is done. So people that have access to my Patreon will get access to the chapter like weeks before it's posted. They get in. Oftentimes people will point out mistakes, typos, silly little mistakes that I've done. Yeah, we planned our outfits for the match. We definitely.
It was just in the hope that you would enjoy it, Paul, in all honesty, mate.
But yeah, so I write down a chapter, I give it to my patrons. They do my beta reading for me, basically, which is great because they're paying me to do my work.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. So yeah, after that, I post it on Royal Road and a few other sites. So really it goes from like really rough draft, slight beta reading. I reread the chapter before I post it, which is why posting takes me a couple of hours every day. And once it's posted, sometimes people will find more mistakes that I missed.
Yeah.
Sometimes people point out plot errors, and people will often discuss in the comments, which is fantastic feedback, right? What sites? Royal Road is the big one. I also post on Scribble Hub and Space Battles. Space Battles is about as niche as it comes. It's a very old forum-based website, but the people on there are very vocal. And because it's a forum-based website, they can't just have like, thank you for the chapter as a comment. They need like a full chunk of comment, so you get a lot of feedback, which is great. So yeah, once that's done, usually the story is going to sit there for a while until like a volume is completed. Once the volume is completed, I collect the whole volume as like one big package. I go through it myself, I edit things, and then I send it off to the if it's published by publishing house, I send it off to publishing house. And if it's published myself, I'll usually just hire a couple editing buddies who will go over it real quick. Then we publish it from there. So it's not the most ideal method. Like I know a lot of authors, and I've done it before too, where you write a draft and then you rewrite the story from the draft, and then you rewrite that again, so it's like perfectly tailored, and then publish. Somebody right next door.
Postman. Be the postman or something. That old enemy.
Yeah, she sees people coming and she's like, I can bark at them. All right.
I was curious because obviously with being, I've started on Royal Road now, but I don't really. I haven't been on Royal Road.
I saw you posted a couple of your stories on there.
Thank you, Ed. It's very strange to me because Royal Road, the way it was explained to me by people was that you can put it, you can put it on and then edit later on, and that was always my intention, to never share the fully edited version, because once it's fully edited, that's it. It's now sort of ready for main release. So then it would have to come straight off Royal Road. So I've put my versions are up there, are totally unedited, and then as errors come along, it's like, right, okay, I'll fix that one, I'll fix this one, and changing things as I go. But for me, because of the way I work, I write the whole thing in one pass. That's it. And then I just read through with sort of, when you get to sort of your chapter 56 or whatever, and you put something down, you go, I really like that, and that works great. And you go, but I need to thread that through, actually. I can't just have Bob walk in the door and everybody go, it's Bob the Magnificent, yay! You have to have, who Bob the Magnificent is.
And everything, yeah.
So then I make notes saying, drop in Bob the Magnificent at whatever points it makes sense. So then I read through quickly, add in Bob the Magnificent, and then send it off to the editors. And I feel sorry for my editors at times because I basically throw the whole thing at them and go, fix that shit. Because my grammar is terrible, which you'll see on Royal Road. So it's very strange for me because then once it comes back, I'm then updating and updating each stage. But I have it through 3 editing strikes.
You can go back and edit what's written on Royal Road.
Yeah.
Most people won't bother. You have to learn to write like a slightly different method where your rough draft is basically publish ready.
Yeah.
Like your rough draft has to be written well enough to keep the attention of your readers. So you can't have too many grammar mistakes. You can't have like plots that go nowhere. You can't have too much wasted time. So you need to learn how to write really well with as few mistakes as possible from your first try. Yeah. And you have to also write in a way that you are aware that once you've posted something, the thing that you posted is now canon.
Yeah.
Like you cannot make a Bob appear out of nowhere, like at chapter 56, if you posted chapters 1 to 55. So exactly that. Your draft needs to be not perfect, obviously, but it needs to be a lot tighter than if you're writing in the more traditional way where you write the rough draft, which is very messy and rough, full of like notes and whatever, and then you write your cleaner draft and then the perfect draft after that. You have to have your very first published version be as close to perfect as possible.
Yeah.
Which is very different from writing in the kind of traditional method.
Yeah. Fortunately, I do just do the one pass, and then sort of I'll tidy things up, and that's it. So it does make things easier for me on that ground. Though, as I say, I will every so often I do come across and go, right, I need to foreshadow this and drop back and add this in. So yeah,
you can still do that, right? Like if you're telling the people on Royal Road, hey, this is kind of the rough draft, there will be mistakes and so on.
Yeah.
And then when it comes time to publishing your full version, you can tell them, hey, if you like the story so far, go on Amazon, buy the version that's there because it's what you've read already, but improved. There's like scenes added, there's characters changed, there's like things have been cut and things have been added and tightened up and improved. So you can definitely improve your story and sell the fact that what people are buying is an improved version of what they've already read.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's why I'm saying that I don't post the edited versions on there. I just post the original version.
Yeah. So you still of course want it to make sense. I've seen some authors, Mika-san does that, for example, where they post the kind of the rough draft, but then on like chapter 56, they might say, yeah, Bob was introduced this chapter. Bob will have been introduced to chapter so-and-so 20 chapters ago in the like perfect final version, by the way. So they add these notes at the end of every chapter saying, these are the fixes that I've done to the final draft. So that readers are still kind of in touch with things. I actually kind of really like that. I don't usually do it because I'm too lazy to keep a change log.
Yeah.
Which I don't bother keeping track of the changes I've made to my own manuscripts. And when I've done them, so that I can tell people, hey, by the way, there's this change done, and this thing changed, and the point cost of this one item changed from like 12 to 15 because otherwise my math would work out or whatever. So there's a lot of that. There's also a lot of mistakes that crop up with. You've been writing lit RPGs as well, right? Of course, there's Lit RPG Legion, and lit RPGs have numbers in them, and numbers lead to mistakes. So I'm really bad with them, and there's always something that doesn't quite work out. So that's always tricky to keep track of as well. But those always introduce a whole new batch of mistakes and everything else. And you'll have some readers that'll actually like work through the math, and they'll be like, "Hey, this doesn't add up."
Yeah,
and that's number one.
I always have like a science and continuity editor as my third. So once it's gone through sort of developmental and then it's gone through line and it comes back and everything's sort of pretty much finished, then it's like, right, under these guys and go, right, now tear it apart, make sure the science works. I had gamma tokamak rods, and he was like, one of the things he said, he was like, that's 3 different forms of technology that don't really work. And he was like, but you could have this and you could have, and it's like, right, that makes more sense. But I originally got Gamma tokamak rods from Peter F. Hamilton and one of his things. And it's like, so the science guys who are professional scientists are saying this doesn't fucking work. And I'm going, okay.
Okay, yeah.
Peter F. Hamilton, he kind of knows what he's doing a little bit as well.
Yeah, I'm writing a couple of sci-fi stories right now, and I love it. I love having to jump down these rabbit holes of science and so on. Yeah. It's like, oh, I don't know how this technology works exactly. I'm going to go watch a documentary on it, or I'm going to go read some documents or whatever. Sometimes it'll happen that a reader happens to be like on a Discord or whatever, happens to be like, oh, this is my field of expertise. And it's like, oh, I'm going to write more about this thing because I can query them and say, hey, like, how does this work exactly? I'm writing one story right now called Noble Bright. It's a quest. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those. They go by a few names.
A what?
A quest.
A quest.
Quest. They're basically interactive fiction. So, no, not familiar. All right. These are from. These have been around for a while, but they were never mainstream. They're popular on sites like Sufficient Velocity and Space Battles. But basically, you have a story, and instead of writing the whole story, you would write chapter 1, then you post chapter 1, and at the end of the chapter, you tell people vote on what you want to happen next, or vote on the character's actions, or vote on. There's different ways of handling it, right? It's kind of like choose your own adventure, but it depends on how you handle it. So, for example, Noble Bright, people control. Basically, I created like a card game within the story, and people control the card game aspect of it. They don't control the characters. So they pick cards that they use, and there's like resources that increase every chapter and resources that increase every chapter, and they have to figure that out. So the readers figure that part out, and they vote on that. I just write the story, and it changes based on how they're playing it.
Yeah.
Some more traditional quests will literally just give the readers control of the character. So you write the world and the building and all the side characters, but the main character's choices are chosen by the readers. So that's really fun, and it's an incredible challenge to write.
Yeah, I can see that.
You're right. You're a writer. You know how plotting goes. But what if you don't control the plot anymore? What if you don't control the character anymore?
Yeah.
Right? Like the main character is no longer under your control as the author. Well, okay, you're ready to write like one of my better older stories is Lovecrafted. It did pretty well. It's like a weird horror. It was supposed to be a horror story.
Yeah.
And so it was supposed to be a horror story from the point of view of the horror monster, which I thought was kind of cool, right? Like a Lovecraftian monster thing. And it was a quest. So it's written in second person. You are the monster, and the readers control the monster. Cool. I thought that was a neat idea. The readers immediately decide that the monster would be this really cute girl that just wants hugs. So that completely derailed every single idea I had, every plot point I was ready to build up. Like everything was just completely gone because this monster wasn't going to be a monster at all. They just wanted head pats and like cuddles and to drink tea or whatever. And it's like, all right, fine. We'll write that. And it turned out to be a lot of fun to write. It was like an experiment, and it was interesting. But it was also very difficult because every time I'd be like, okay, I'm going to plot the next 5-10 chapters. I need to know what to foreshadow and what to build ahead. And then the very next chapter, the readers will go off and decide, hey, we're going to go on an adventure now. So we're going to go walk in the woods. Okay, all right, fine. Like, all right, cool. It's like, oh, okay, we're going to go to school now instead of doing this other stuff that, we wanted to do. So yeah, I genuinely suggest that as an author, if you try to write one of these, it is very hard. But at the same time, it is very rewarding. You're writing plots that are out of your control. Usually you have to update daily, and they can be really short chapters, about 1,000 words. So you can write them like an hour or two.
See, that wouldn't work for me because I can't I can't work in 2 different worlds at the same time, let alone 6.
Really?
I've tried it. I've tried it when I was working on 2 of my different series, when I had to sort of some editing problems came up, and yeah, it's fucking crazy. And I had to sort of jump back to the old world that I'd just finished with and do some changes there while I was halfway through writing the next book in a different series, and it was an absolute headfucker. I cannot do it. That is not how my brain works whatsoever.
I can't not. I genuinely have it. Well, I can write just one book at a time, but if I write one chapter, I need time before I can write the second. So if you tell me, hey, you need to write a chapter Cinnamon Bun today, sure, no problem. I can't write a second chapter Cinnamon Bun tomorrow. I just can't. My brain will absolutely freeze up. It's going to take me twice as long to write one chapter. So if a chapter takes me like 4 hours to write, it's going to take me 8 to write a second chapter tomorrow. But if you tell me, hey, write a second chapter in 2 days, well, then I've had time to think. I've had time to go for a walk with Molly. I've had time to like consider things and let it percolate. Then I'll be able to write the chapter in a normal amount of time without any difficulty. So my options then are either write one story and just write a chapter every other day or every 3 days, or write 2 stories and write one chapter of story A today, a chapter of story B tomorrow. And so that's what I started to do. And I was like, oh, this actually works. And while I'm writing chapter story B, my mind is thinking about story A, so I can switch back. And early on, what I was doing is I was like purposefully writing in different tenses of different persons. I'd be writing a story in present tense and a story in past tense, which helped differentiate them. And then I'd write a story in first person and third person, first person or third person. And that helped differentiate things. But at some point I was like, well, if I can write 2 stories, one every other day, well, I have time to write 2 chapters in one day. So why not just write 2 chapters a day? Yeah. But I can't do A, B. So it was like, well, I have to do A, B, then C, D, then A, B, then C, D. So I ended up writing 4 stories at the same time. And it just felt really natural to write 4 stories at the same time. So then I said, well, there's not an even number of days in the week. It's 7. It doesn't quite divide properly. So what makes a lot more sense is to just write 7 stories, because then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's a different, one. So you're right. Anyway, so I scheduled it all out, and I was like, hey, this feels perfectly natural. It feels really good. So that's just what I started to do. So 2 chapters per story per week, and like 7 stories on average. Now I'm down to 6 because I just finished one of them. I just finished Agartha Blue yesterday.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just what I do. I genuinely like that. It keeps me busy. It keeps my brain going. And I feel like it's rewarding to me to be able to like, every time I sit down, it's like, okay, I have like a lot of different things to think about across different worlds and different settings and so on. Again, I don't like writing the same thing twice. So yeah. I tend to make my stories wildly different from each other. I like it when they share themes. But other than that, like the shared thematic links, I try to make the world building as different as possible. So yeah, I'd end up with like really wildly different scenarios and so on, which I find a lot of fun. It's very rewarding to write that.
It sounds it. I mean, I can see the advantages of it, but God, also knowing the way my brain works, that's just
it's not for everyone. It takes a lot of practice, I think. I wouldn't suggest anybody just jump in the deep end. Like if you find that like it doesn't work for you, you're a one story kind of person, that's fine. If you think you're a multiple story kind of person, don't start at 7. Maybe start at 2. Get used to like switching between 2 stories. Because of course I ran into some issues where I would write a chapter or something and I'd be like, oh wait, I'm halfway through this chapter. I'm writing this in first person. It's supposed to be in third. Yeah. It's like, oh crap, I have to go back and change that a little bit. I mean, sometimes I'd write in the wrong tense, which isn't hard to switch out, right? Like it's easy to go in a chapter and switch out the tense.
Yeah.
Present to past. That's easy. That's an easy fix. But it's still kind of annoying when you realize halfway through a chapter that like, crap, I made a mistake. Which is why you generally read the chapter before the one you're writing.
Yeah.
To give you an idea of where you are in the story and everything.
Get your head back in the game.
Yeah, get your head back in the game. Especially if you're writing stories that have very different different genres, of course, but like different writing styles to them. So if you're writing like a Western, that you're going to put your focus on different things than if you're writing a fantasy story. It's going to be slight changes in words and so on that you'll use depending on the age of the character, the style of the story, the tone that you're trying to set, and so on. So yeah, that's just kind of what I do right now. That's what I like doing.
Yeah.
So,
I mean that's wildly impressive in so many ways, because it's just so different to everything that I and most of my colleagues that I work with. Because we write as a few of us. Sorry,
it's not good financially.
Yeah,
because the way that most systems are set up right now, an author will get recognized for one story. It's very uncommon that you'll hear an author's like get recognized for multiple stories that they bring. It happens, but it's not as common. And like most of us in the genre are like, look, this person is the person who wrote that story there. And that's the most successful people in our niche are known for one single story, and that's their story. And it's very difficult to be able to grab an audience from one story and push them towards another. People don't do that. They don't like that. So unless you're, and I've run into that issue quite a bit, where it's like, okay, I have a story. It's not the same genre as my other stories. Well, my people who relate to story A will absolutely not read story B, because it's not the same genre, it's not the same style or whatever. And they've gotten used to one thing, they don't want the other thing. And it takes a lot of time to get past that resistance that people have to get them used to, okay, maybe I should try this author's other works.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's difficult. So yeah, it's one story. Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, for me, I write 3 different series at the moment.
Okay. Do you write like one book of one series and then one book of the other, and then kind of switch back?
I usually do 2. Yeah.
Okay.
I usually do 2 books and then I move on to the next one. But most of my books are around sort of 200 to 300,000 words.
Well,
so they take about 3 months to write each time. Okay. So then
you're doing about like what 1.2 million words a year then?
About 1.5.
You're writing more than I am then. Like word count wise.
It depends on the size. I mean, book 6 of Underverse was 413,000.
That's huge.
So
yeah.
the smallest book I've done is 171. So it sort of evens out. People that I know that read your work rarely have the same series in their mind when we talk about you, but I love most of your work but can't get into Stray. Literally what we were saying there.
That's it. So Stray is I'm fond of Stray. I like Stray. But Stray Cat Strut is not the same as my other books. It's a very dystopian, dark world. You know, the main character is not dystopian. The focus, the tone is very more lighthearted. It's like an action flick almost. It's like I was very inspired by stuff like Die Hard and stories like that, where it's like, let's just have like a chunk of time. It's just gonna be nonstop action. But yeah, that's very different from my other stories. If you compare Cinnamon Bun's probably my second most popular series right now. You cannot have any more different between the two, right? Like one's sci-fi, the other one is fantasy. One of them is like dystopian, the other one is like super lighthearted, happy, kind of campy almost world. One of them, the main character is like this ragtag, very into sex and violence kind of character, and the other one is Broccoli. It's like she's pure and happy and doesn't do anything like that. So yeah, you have like very, very different shifts. So if somebody likes Cinnamon Bun and they're like, hey, I'm going to go read Stray Cat Strut, they're going to get like a massive tonal whiplash between one and the other. It's like they're so different from each other that you know, there's still readers that like both. But that tonal difference is pretty hard to overcome, right? And then you have like stories that are like closer to another. So like Fluff is very close to Cinnamon Bun in terms of tone, right? It's I'm not sure if you've heard of Fluff, but it's like a superhero story set in the modern world, but it's also very sweet and like it's found family, and it's very soft and it's wholesome.
Yeah.
So it's less violent, and like the violence that there is very comedic. So yes, you end up with this kind of like, oh, if you like this, you can transition to that, but if you go further into my other works, you might leave the genres and styles that you're comfortable with. They kind of have, yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult.
Yeah, I'm just still thinking like writing so many different genres at the same time. It's like Jesus. My 3 series are, I mean, they are different. One's fantasy, one's urban fantasy, and one's portal fantasy, one's urban fantasy, and one's dungeon core. They're very different in those sort of rails, but the worlds are always dark. It's always gritty. It's always like seriously shit hit the fan and things are fucking dying everywhere. God no, I couldn't write. I have tried writing sort of nicer things and more cheerful and nicer worlds. It just doesn't fucking happen.
Cheerful worlds are exceptionally difficult to write. People don't realize it because you look at it, it's like, this is all fluffy and rainbows and cotton candy. How hard can that be? It is much, in my personal experience, this is me, it is much harder for me to write something fluffy and sweet than it is to write something dark and gritty. Because dark and gritty, it's like it's a tone that's like a really hard contrast, right? It's like dark, gritty, things are violent, things are not good, things are bad, and bad things tend to be bad in kind of a universal way, right? Whereas good and happy is complicated. Like, how do you make things happy in a world while keeping that world consistent and logical and having its own internal rule set and everything else? And it's just kind of difficult to keep going. Lovecrafted was also. I'm glad you enjoyed Lovecrafted. Lovecrafted is a hard sell. Like a fluffy Lovecraftian story. It's just not something that's kind of
it's not something you usually put together. Yeah, those two thoughts. Yeah, I'm gonna have to hunt that out and have a read of it.
I'm happy with how it turned out. That one needed a lot of editing. Before I was happy to publish it on Amazon, because again, it was a quest. So it was written with like at the end of every chapter, people would vote on what would happen to the main character in the next chapter, which made for a completely discordant, like detached story that just kind of went all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And that was a lot of editing to trim that down, remove chunks that kind of went nowhere, and like have an actual plot that made some sense.
They bound it all together, yeah.
Bound it all together, and also it's written in second person, which is just. I had some at the time. I was less known. I didn't know the industry as well. But I published that in 2019, I think, and I had some editors just bounce off completely. They just said, "Oh, this is second person. No, thank you. I'm not going to touch that," because they're just not familiar with it. And it's just like, all right, fine, that's cool. But yeah, it's like, okay, that was a strange one. But I'm happy I wrote it. As I don't know if you've ever joined. You obviously have your own writing community, right? But I don't know if you've ever joined other writing communities that are like a little bit more elitist. Because I've noticed that in the writing circles, there's a lot of like a little bit of pretentiousness, right? A little smidge. And there's some people that are like, you have to write for the art and this and that and that. And that's like kind of hard to handle sometimes, especially if you're a fantasy writer and like, you're writing genre fiction. That's less artistic. And I love that I wrote Lovecraft because I can just whip that out and be like, oh yeah, I published a book in second person. It's based on like H.P. Lovecraft, and like it's a fluffy fantasy story about cute stuff in like an H.P. Lovecraft lens. It's like, be more artist than that. So I'm proud of that for that reason. But it's quite stupid. But I'm happy I wrote it. It was a fun experience. It was a lot of fun. But it's a hard sell. It's hard to convince people, hey, read this story that's written in second person. People are just not used to it. People are like, that it feels wrong and it doesn't feel comfortable for me. So,
well, first person's so easy to get into.
First person is so easy to write. I like third person as well. Like it's fine. First to third person. I like my third person very limited when I write it generally. So it's like it's basically first person, but like he or she did this instead of I. So it's very, it's very close. I've tried third person omniscient a few times, and I've never been able to manage.
I can't.
I can't. I just can't. You need to wrap your head around in such a way that is just very, very difficult for me to do.
Yeah.
I can do it for like a chapter or two. I don't think I could do it for an entire book.
No.
It would be too much effort, and I don't like reading it either. So they would.
It's because you know everything. With omniscient, a friend recently was going through this and thought he was writing in third person omniscient, and discovered he wasn't. When the editor explained to him, he said, "Well, like you're writing in third person partial or third person semi-omniscient."
Well, it's a scale, right? Like you could be limited very close to the character, and you can be limited further out, and then you could be like way off in left field, and then you're omniscient. But exactly.
But the way it was described, which is the best way I've heard it described, was that it was that Harry Potter, for example, is third person partially omniscient or semi, because it's not seen from behind Harry's eyes. You are not Harry. You see Harry and the other characters.
You're in the room with Harry and the other characters while they're doing stuff. Yeah.
But it's a case of if it was fully omniscient, you would have known straight away that Snape isn't the bad guy that he is. That it is seen throughout it. And I thought that was wonderful because that explained it so well that you would have known what all of Snape's secrets. You would have known everything straight away. And that, as the difference, is the way to explain, third party omniscient.
It's very difficult, right? You need to know your world a lot better. You need to know your plot a lot better. And you have to put all the mysteries and stuff that in a normal story would be hidden. You have to know them all before you even start writing it so that you can tell the audience. You can have omniscient with an unreliable narrator, which is the only way I've kind of found to do it. And it's when it's omniscient and the narrator happens to be a liar. Which is like, okay, so you have an omniscient narrator, third person, and the narrator is like clearly not telling the truth or not telling the entire truth. So now when the narration says, "Oh, this is a good guy," and then you as a reader read what the person is doing, and you're like, "Wait a minute, this good guy just did something that's clearly not a good thing." The narration lied to me, which is very cool. And it's like, that is a cool way to write. But people might not necessarily like to read that type of story, and it's difficult to write. So that's.
I don't know if I could do. I don't
know. I don't think it would sell well either. Like it's just not as popular. People like their third person. People like their first person, and they prefer something that's more in the head of a character. Having a good character is like a big selling point, right? Like,
having straightforward, this is a good person, this is a bad person. There you go. We know straight away. Yeah.
You can have like great characters, of course, but it's trickier. It's harder to do. It's difficult. I feel uncomfortable.
Don't you worry, Ed. I'm not knowledgeable.
No.
Sometimes we just swear a lot, and other times we are going into more of the science stuff.
I like it. I know this is probably not the most entertaining thing for the average reader to listen to, but like I like the mechanics of writing. I always really love that. Sitting down, doing role building, and just tinkering with the actual writing. That's always been my go-to favorite kind of thing to do as part of the hobby, right?
Yeah.
So I'm always impressed when I read something written by someone and I can be like, they've really like pushed the envelope here. They've really done something impressive. I like that almost more than I like a good story or a good character. But again, that's not something that sells well, right? Like, hey, check the story out. It was really well written. Yeah, the character is crap. The story doesn't make sense. The plot is whatever. The world building is. But hey, the technical side of this is really nice. It's like showing someone a painting and being like, look at these brush strokes. Yeah, the proportions are wrong, but look at the brush strokes.
Yeah, the painting's crap, but the brush strokes
are crap. Beautiful. The proportions don't make sense. Everything is crooked. But look how well they no, it's something that like an artist will appreciate, and other artists will appreciate, like you doing or somebody else doing. But yeah, it's not something that'll help you get that painting hung on the wall, so to speak.
Yeah. See, I find it really interesting because I love talking to people like this and seeing the difference in the writing styles and the way that you see the world, because everybody sees it so differently.
Yeah, I think it depends on how people learn how to write as well, to some degree. How much experience you have, and also like how much you enjoy the actual artistry of writing, as opposed to just the artistry of storytelling, which is like its own thing, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, I'd never tried to write before doing my first book.
Really?
I was just determined. It was just determined I was going to finish it in the end. I was like, oh, this. Threw it at the editor, and I was like, there you go, fix that shit. You know, I failed school, as I've told my guys a few times.
I was awful in school. I was terrible. I did really good in English class. Unsurprisingly. But everything else, just terrible grades across the board. I was reading in class. I was just not paying attention to any class. I spent more time in the library than anything else. I'd sneak out of class and just go, I'm going to go read some books. I was a delinquent, but the nerdy, non-troubly making sort.
I was more of I was working full time in the family restaurant, so I was having a drink or 6 after work on a night time, and then I was going to a lock-in usually, and I was going to work drunk. I was going to school drunk rather, and I was just, you know, one of my exams, I remember my maths exam I did in 4 minutes and 37 seconds on a dare beforehand, and that was like my final one of my exams. I didn't do most of the exams sober enough to know what the fuck was going on, so you can imagine how well I did with them. And I just lied blatantly on other jobs when I went for them. I just lied that I'd got great grades, and they were like, "Oh, fine, come on in."
Nobody's gonna check that. No.
Fuck that shit.
So I'm curious. So how old are you? I know it was your birthday yesterday, right?
It was, yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, mate. It's 2003. It's 43.
43. Okay. So you've got a few years on me. I'm 30.
Yeah. See, it's okay. You're only as old as the person you feel.
Oh well, in that case, I'm like 70 something.
Oh well, never mind.
it's the joints, you know. It's the back pain.
It's one thing, just going to back pain and shit like that, because we spend all day sitting at a desk typing.
It's really bad for you. It's really, like I actually spent a lot of money on a good chair, and it changed everything, because I was having constant back pain, like constantly having back pain. I was like, okay, this is just too much. And I tried different things, like with cushions. I did this, I sat, but you don't have a choice. You have to write a certain amount per day, right? So it's like, regardless of if it hurts or not, you got to do it. And it just, you sit down more, so it hurts more. And eventually I just said, no, screw this. I'm just going to buy a really good chair. And I ended up buying a really good chair, this one over here. And it's like, oh, okay. And then within 2 months, I haven't had back pain in over a year. It's like,
See, for me, I got a Secret Lab chair, and I love it, and it's brilliant. But I was recently diagnosed with sleep apnea.
Okay, yeah.
So it's basically that when I'm fast asleep, I stop breathing for up to 30 seconds. And I do this all night long. So this terrified my wife. She's sort of like, she's lying there one night, and obviously we've been together for like 10 years now. So she's been pretty used to me doing this. But we couldn't sleep one night, had insomnia, and started timing it, and realized that when you're having like 30 seconds without oxygen, you're actually damaging your brain. I'm giving myself brain damage every night.
Sleep, yeah.
But
terrifying.
We realized that I was also literally in chronic exhaustion because I was never getting any real sleep. So totally fucked. And she decided, right, bugger this, made an appointment for me to go and see a sleep apnea, a sleep therapist, and all the rest of it. But we're still waiting on that. And it's months and months later. And she just went, fuck it, and bought me a CPAP machine, which is one of these like Darth Vader motherfuckers. Yeah, it's like
plugged to your nose.
Yeah, you look like
they look so uncomfortable.
Aliens, that thing's on your face. Go to sleep.
I can't imagine sleeping with that on my face.
It is the first night. It's not comfortable, right? You wake up the next morning and you go, what the fuck? I will get used to wearing that. Because it is amazing, the difference. It's like night and day. Well, that might be a slight difference, Nick. But waking up the next morning and suddenly not being exhausted, waking up and being like, oh, well, time to get up, as opposed to, oh, fucking hell. I'm really not. But this is the thing, because I've started to sleep so much deeper, and it's wonderful, it really is, but it means I'm not moving overnight. So I'm getting bad backs now for the first time in my life because I'm not moving. So I wake up the next morning, I'm crippled. I'm like, what the fuck? Either I can't sleep and I'm fucked the next day because I can barely, function.
You need to get one of those really nice mattresses,
We've got one, but it's because I'm not moving at all. I've moved constantly all night long for my entire life. So now I've stopped doing that. My body's going into a freak out.
I'm awful. I will go to sleep on one side of the bed and I'll wake up on the other. I'll roll around all night long.
Yeah. It's one of those things that it takes a little while to get used to, but it's things. Anybody that has really bad snoring and wakes up every day feeling like shit, look into it.
I'll have to look into it. I get a lot of sleep. I noticed. Well, my Discord makes a lot of fun of me for my sleep schedule. I think we went over it once. It takes me 21 days to go around the clock. And by that, I wake up about an hour and a half later every day. So, I'll wake up at 5 in the morning, and the next day I'll wake up at 6:30, and then the next day I'll wake up at 8. And it's just because I go to bed when I'm tired. I don't have a work schedule, right? I don't wake up and start working at 9 in the morning and then stop at 5. I start working and I finish working when I'm done. And oftentimes,
I guess you're single.
Yes. I could not do this if I had a significant other. It would drive them insane, I believe, most people. If I had any other job, this wouldn't be possible, right? So I wake up when I'm not tired. I go to bed when I'm tired. I'm like, oh, I'm tired. If I'm tired, I can't focus, right? If I can't focus, then I can't write. So I might as well just go to bed. So I'll sleep 7, 8, 9 hours, and I'll wake up and oh, I'm refreshed. I'm ready to go. And if I woke up at 2 a.m., then I'll do 16 hours of work, having woken up at 6 a.m. The first time I joined Discord, I tried to guess RD's location based on when they were waking up. And my first guess was Hong Kong. Yeah, and then I'll do it.
Wow.
Yeah, so it takes me about 2 to 3 weeks to go around the clock of waking up. Eventually I'll wake up in the morning again, a normal time.
I've noticed that you're online a lot of the time when I am, and with me being in the UK and you in Canada, it's a bit of a difference.
It's 5 hour difference, right? It's nearing 9 o'clock for you?
Yeah, it's about 9:30, 10:15.
Okay.
Getting 10 o'clock here.
Yeah. So it's 5 o'clock here. I woke up 4 hours ago. At
Dude, I'm so jealous.
1 o'clock. Yeah,
I don't have two small children.
I don't have kids. I don't have kids. I don't have a significant other. I have the dog, and she doesn't seem to mind.
He's used to your schedule.
Yeah, she's used to my schedule. So when I wake up, she gets all excited because it's walkie's time, regardless of if the sun's out or not. So yeah, that's what I do. It's probably not healthy. Maybe it is. I don't know. I'm getting 8 hours of sleep in my 24 hours, right? So that's not bad, I think.
I was a shift worker for a lot of years. So, I'd work 2 weeks of day shift, then 2 weeks of night shift. And you train yourself into it, and it just fucks with your body, with all your circadian rhythms and whatnot.
I think that might have been it for me too. The moment I finished high school, I picked up a cleaning job. It was 4 or 5 days a week. It was 4 days one week, 3 days the next, or something like that. I can't quite remember. And I did that job for 8 years. It was just clean work. It was just big stores in the area, and it was always at night. So I just drive over to the store just as it was closing at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and I clean until 4 or 5 in the morning. And I did that for a long time, 7 or 8 years. I had other jobs too. day jobs. But I had that night job. So oftentimes what I would do is I'd wake up in the morning, I'd go to work, I'd come back home, I'd sleep for 2 or 3 hours, then I'd go do my cleaning work, and I'd come back home and I'd sleep for another 4 or 5 hours, and I'd go back to work. So it was kind of like this constant rotation. And I used to find time to write in between, right? I had office jobs and stuff like that, so I just type when I could. Cleaning work is fantastic for writing because it's just monotonous.
And so your brain is always ready to go. Yeah.
You just spent 7 hours walking, basically, all pushing them off or whatever. And nobody else is around. It's super quiet. You're not going to get any phone calls or anything. So you get 7 hours of thinking time. So when you get home, you've had all this time just to do nothing but think. And like, okay, how am I going to write this next chapter?
Yeah.
Do this. You think of like a bunch of sentences and like, okay, I'm going to phrase this way, I'm going to phrase that this way. You had all the time to think. So you sit down, you're like, I forgot half of it, but I remember the other half. So you write down really quickly, and then you're good. Probably wouldn't actually suggest someone do that.
Well, like I said, welding for me was like that because it's if it sounds terrible, sounds very self-centered, very egotistical. If you're good at it, then it becomes very much like almost I don't know if it's not really therapy, but it's like a relaxing feeling to weld because it coming along beautifully. You can work it, and it's a hard physical job, so your body's fully engaged all the time, but your brain isn't. Once you're good at it, it's sort of like you're just like
you're daydreaming the entire time.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of welding incidentally as part of other jobs. I could never get used to TIG welding. I couldn't weld 2 plates together if you gave me all day. But I was decent with the MIG because those are kind of dumbed down enough for me. But yeah, I did some body work for a while as a mechanic in cars and stuff. So I kind of knew how to figure that out and just tack things in place,
Yeah.
But yeah, if you know what you're doing with any job, then you don't need to think about it as much. And then that gives you time to think about other stuff. Writing is really just putting down the words so that somebody can daydream the thing that you've written, right? So if you know how to daydream yourself, you just have to figure out how to get others to jump on that. It is very weird when you start actually thinking about what writing is. It gets a bit weird.
A bit of a head fucker. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, hey, I'm gonna put these symbols down. I'm gonna make you hallucinate them. You're gonna love doing this. You're gonna do this for like 9 hours straight, no problem.
Yeah, it's like
yeah.
It's a very strange thing, but it's so nice writing. I really enjoy writing.
Yeah, the actual process of writing is really nice.
Therapeutic.
It's soothing, it's therapeutic.
Except when you're having those bad days and you can't seem to get it together, and then it's like it's not therapeutic at all. So you finish and you're like, for fuck's sake.
Well, just write 4 other books and just switch over to one of the other ones. That's easier for a little bit. You'll get the juices flowing, then you go back and you're fine.
See, for me, it's generally a case of if I'm getting interrupted, because I like to aim for sort of 8,000 to 10,000 words a day. And
I write a lot more per day than I do. Yeah.
But for me, I'm working sort of 9 till 5. That's it. So I'll stop for a little bit for lunch, but I'm at the desk and I'm a very, very sort of routine oriented for me. So when I'm doing it like that, I'm just like, right, there we go. Let's just keep going. And when you've got a good sprint going, like I often do with Lars, when we sort of pounding away, and then it's like, oh, you finish the sprint and you go, oh, brilliant, I got this many. Oh, I fucking got that one. You are still alive here. We're even drinking.
Yeah, I'm not good at doing a lot of words in one day. I'm really bad at it. Like my all-time record is 7,200.
Right.
That's like I've been keeping track for I have 10 years or so of sheets of Excel sheets, keeping track of how many words I've written in a day, and I've never managed to get past that note. But what I do what I am good at is doing my like 3,000 to 4,000 words every day, 7 days a week, 30 days in a month, which is where it kind of adds up.
Definitely. I mean,
one way or the other, right? Like I know a lot of authors that are like you, that will just be like, okay, I'm going to do 10,000 words today. I'm going to pound them out, and it's going to be done. And it's like that's a tenth of a book almost. If you're aiming for like 100K, it's like okay, they'll just do that. Then you have the absolute weirdos like Pirate Abba who do just disgusting amounts of work. I think their new record is 160,000 words in 1 week.
That's fucking horrific.
That's horrific. That is awful. Well, I mean, it's not. We're saying horrific. It is awesome in the biblical sense. So, like, no,
it is.
No, you cannot do that. Yeah, but that's their thing, right? They just do a lot. They just constantly going.
Think of the degeneracy. Yeah. I can't imagine putting out that amount of words. I mean, the most I think I've ever done in a day is just under 12,000, like 11.7 or something. But it's like I'll do those, but I aim to do sort of 8 to 10 a day, and I can generally hit that if I don't get interruptions. But if I get interruptions, I am. Yeah, I'll get like emails saying, "Can you just sort such and such?" Or "Is this right?" And if I stop to check it, because I know there's an email there, I can't leave it the fuck alone. It's not the way my brain works. I have to respond to it. I have to deal with that problem.
I have the same issue. I have a very difficult time with side distractions and stuff like that, which is why I like writing at night, because there's no phone calls. There's no new emails most of the time. Like very few people send you an email at 4 a.m. For anything. It'll happen, but it's less, most of the time you'll get emails in the morning and afternoon. But yeah, so you generally want to avoid distractions where you can, if you can, and they cost you so much if you get hit by one. It's getting out of your stride, right? And it's like I'm going.
Getting your head back in the zone. I mean, it might only be a 5-minute interruption, but that 5-minute interruption, you've got to then go back to read over the last section that you were doing and get your head back into that section.
Yeah, so you lose ideas you had, spend time trying to rethink what was that idea that I had, and like that tone that I was going for, whatever.
It's total head fucker.
No. God damn it, Ed. But yeah.
Sorry, what nose? I'm sniffing. Sorry about that.
Good. So you write mostly urban fantasy and like classic fantasy, I suppose would be the term for it.
I do all sorts, to be honest with you. I mean, I did portal fantasy, so another world fantasy with.
Are we talking more like tropey isekai fantasy there, or are we talking more portal fantasy like old school?
More portal fantasy than isekai. I've done for Underverse. I've done about 1.7 million words in that one. So it's 7 books out in that. Rise of Mankind is my dungeon crawl that's got about 1.2, I think, so far.
Okay.
And then Arise is the urban fantasy one, which has only got about 480. Well, no, about 540 now at the moment.
Yeah, Smalley's.
Which is the back.
She's right over here. She's using. She has used underneath the AC. She likes that.
What breed is she?
Some sort of German Shepherd mixed with something, I think. Fantasy stuff.
Yeah. Or urban fantasy. Yeah.
That line can be pretty thin sometimes. Between
very much so.
Depending on the angle you approach it at. Yeah.
Well, I started writing it as sci-fi, and then when I was describing it to my typographer of all people, and I was talking about the different styles for it, and she was like, "Oh, so it's really heavily urban fantasy," and I was like, "No, it isn't. So it's this. Yes, that's urban fantasy." I was like, "Shit, you're right. That wasn't the plan at all." But it's also a 6-book series, and it was supposed to be standalone single book. So
that happens though. It is really difficult to end something, because I think some readers don't understand it, but when you're ending a story, you're just basically choosing not to tell the rest, right?
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, I'm going to cut it off here because it's a satisfying moment to cut off the story. But the story can always continue. I haven't thought of many. I haven't seen many stories where the ending is an actual ending.
Yeah.
Where it's like that's actually it. Like it's done. That's it. This is just a stopping point. You can definitely continue forever.
Yeah. I think it was David Eddings that at the end of the Malorian, it was something like, and this was the end. There are more stories to come, but they will never be told, or something along those lines. It was just like, and this is the end of this story. Fuck off. And I was just like, fair point then.
Fair enough, Yeah. It's hard, especially when you have like a long serials and stuff like that, where it's like, I don't want to end it. And lately I've been writing things in volumes more.
Yeah.
Like I've been aiming for to write stuff in arc styles, where before what I did was I just keep on writing my stories and just keep on going and going and going and going.
Yeah.
And I realized that no, I need breaks from some of these stories. I need to stop at some point. So now I write with like an end point in sight, and I'll stop there and I'll just stop writing that story for a while. I'll go write other stuff and not come back to it. Oftentimes I've had time to think between one thing and the other. My big mistake was the story I wrote a while ago called Dead Tired. That's a weird one, but it was quite popular on Little Road. I think it had like 4,500, almost 5,000 followers.
Wow!
In like a really short period. And the basic premise is pretty simple. It's like a lich goes to sleep and he wakes up millennia later, and he realizes that like, the world that he was used to has changed significantly. And so his world was like a typical Western fantasy world with kind of a D&D based system in it. And the world he wakes up in is like a Chinese fantasy world, like a Xianxia or whatever, Wuxia type world, with like young masters and sex and like all this kind of like Eastern fantasy stuff. And he's like, oh, this is not at all what I'm expecting. This is not good at all. So he decides to do something about it. And it's a comedy. It's just really dumb puns and stupid jokes all over the place. It did pretty well. But because it did so well, I wrote the first volume of it and I started posting it. And it was just getting a lot of views. So I'm going to keep writing it. I started writing the second volume. That's Dead Tired, Richard. So I started writing the second volume of it, and I got stuck really hard. Like I hadn't gotten writer's block that bad in the story for a long time, and it just smacked me right in the face. I just had no idea where to go with it, and I just had to put it down. I just had to be like, I can't continue the story. I'm putting it on a hiatus, and I hated doing it, but I was stuck. I just couldn't continue, and it took me a year and a half before I started picking it up again. It's being there's no chapters coming out now. It revived well enough, so I'm happy for that. But yeah, so it took me a long time just because I just broke myself into a bit of a corner. And it took me months of actual thinking and going through the story and rereading it. No, that's not available anywhere. Richard, it's basically only available on Railroad and a few other sites like that. So it's for free if you want to read it. Go ahead. I have edited it and it's almost completely ready to be published on Amazon. I just haven't had the time. I have about 4 books that are ready to publish. I just do not have the patience and time to go through it all. It's just such a runaround and everything. I need to find a publisher that'll just offload them for me. I don't have the patience to deal with Amazon. Anyway, I can't remember why I started talking about that story specifically. But yeah, I got stuck on this story. I got really caught up with it. And it took me forever before I was able to get back into it, to write down this one scene that I had in mind. It was like a really complicated scene. And then once that was done, I kept going. So basically, ever since then, what I do now is when I write a story, I write it to the end of a volume or a book, and then I just stop for a while.
Yeah.
So I get to the end of I just finished volume 2 of Garth Loop yesterday. So that's done. Like, I'm not going to touch volume 3 for a couple months, at least, until I've finished up a couple of other stories and I have another place in my schedule. But in the meantime, those months pass by. That gives me a lot of time to think about things.
See, it still seems so strange to me that you've got so many running. Good seeing you again, Nick. Thank you, mate. That you've got so many plots running in your head because my brain works so differently. I mean, I can't do that. I'm working, as I say, on 3 series, and I do 2 books or thereabouts generally. And I'm going to try and write. I'm writing Arise 3 and 4 at the moment. I'm going to try and write 3, 4, 5, and 6 and finish it in the next sort of year. That's my sort of plan, and then I'll go on to the next series and work on that. I'm going to try and limit myself to 1 series at a time. But I needed to change to writing different series because I'd written about 750,000 words, I think, in Underverse. And when I wrote Age of Stone for Rise of Mankind, it was never intended to be released. It was never for anybody else. It was just I needed to clean my head out. I needed to just wipe it all clear. I use Sansia to line script from reading mine, Brian and Kev's. Yeah, well, that'll do it. I mean, Brian's very different style to Kev and I. I mean, Kev and I are quite similar in styles, but Brian's very different.
Yeah, switching genres as a reader is great for like scrubbing your mind of all the tropes and so on that you get from reading the same genre over and over. There was a good question here that I kind of skipped over. I always wondered how having 2 similar stories, like Garth Loop and Crystal Genocide, going at the same time worked out. That was never too difficult. Most of the time, I have stories that are like not quite the same genre going at the same time. So I won't have like a Garth Loop and Crystal Genocide at the same time. I'll have a bit of space between them. Oh, there's Molly. Molly. She's French.
She's French?
She doesn't speak English. Well, she doesn't speak English. She doesn't talk. But she doesn't understand English. So she has to talk to her in French. Otherwise, she doesn't respond. Weird issue of living in Quebec. You get French dogs.
I'm just wondering, if you get French and English dogs, do they have problems with each other? I mean, do they
you know what? It might bark and bork. No, I think it's mostly like commands like sit. It's just it'll only work with an English dog, right? With French dogs, if they sit all day long, they just won't get you because they've never been trained in that language.
But do you not just retrain them in the language? I mean, I've got
most dogs. If you taught them how to sit when you say sit, it's not going to be that hard to teach them how to sit when you say SC, right? Yeah. Like they'll catch on.
Yeah.
It's just that you have to train them to understand a second command word for the same command.
Yeah.
And if you've already taught them the one, it's not that hard to get the same. It's just that when the dog knows like 15, 20 different commands in one language, it's kind of a pain to retrain them so many times.
Oh yeah, I suppose because I've got a dog called Buddy. He's also called Budweiser Shit Biscuit the Third because he is just like
that as well.
He does, but he knows if he's getting called Budweiser, he's up shit creek. And it's like, if I turn around and he's on the table, he's on the dining room table, and he's creeping towards like one of my kids' food because they've turned the other way or something. It's like Budweiser, straight off the table, he's away. But if I go Buddy, no reaction at all. He's like, I've still got some time before until I get Budweiser. I'm all right here.
Yeah, well, Molly annoyed me today. She ate an entire 2-pound bag of dog treats.
Oh,
she's been puking them all over the place. It's great.
Yeah,
just huge piles of It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
You want to talk about your experience with Audible? You got some very good narrators, and your audiobooks are all very well made. I've been very, very, very lucky with Audible, especially the narrators I've gotten. Like I've just lucked into so many good narrators, and like oftentimes if you publish like Podium or whatever. I don't know if you have audiobooks. I can't remember. Yeah. Okay. Did you make your the audiobooks yourself, like with your ACX, or?
No, I went through sort of Podium and Tantor primarily, and just for the first couple of years, because obviously they're seriously expensive to make. So it was I sold the rights to those, and then we'll see from now on.
Yeah. If you're new to writing, shelling out $3,000 to $6,000 for a book, and you're not sure if you're going to make it back, that's a big chunk of money to ask.
It was always, for me, it wasn't so much that I was worried I wouldn't make it back. It was a case of, for example, so for most narrators, you're looking at around $400 per finished hour. And then you're looking at, about 10,000 words is equivalent to 1 hour.
Oh, so your books are huge too.
So you're looking at sort of between 10 and 12,000 it's going to cost me to record the books. The bigger ones, you're looking at sort of 20,000 plus to record the books. And when you're looking at like a 12-book series, you go, all right, that's going to be 100 to 150,000 by the time I work it all out.
You're going to make it back, probably.
But it's putting your hand in the pocket for 150 grand. It's just, when you're first starting out, it ain't possible.
It's rough. Yeah, my books aren't quite. My books are almost always exactly 100K, or exactly within 100K, 120K.
Yeah.
So they're not that expensive to narrate. But I still went with Podium because I looked at the amount of time it takes to do the work yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I could have gotten something done like of decent quality if I was doing most work myself, except for the narration. But the time, just the sheer time expense is just incredible. So I was like, no. And if you give it to Podium or Tantor or whoever, they just take care of it and you get paid. It's like, I don't have to do anything. Well, you have to do a little bit, but I've been lucky with narrators, but I've also put my foot down a couple times where, like, hey, we're going to use this narrator over here, and I listen to them. It's like, no, it's just they don't fit. Or it just doesn't sound right.
I generally include the narrators in negotiation, like not in both of it, but I mean, as in I say to whoever it is I'm negotiating with that this is the narrator that I want for it.
Okay.
Like, we'll talk about it. It's like, no, this is the narrator I want for this. So this is who I'm getting for it. Or I'll go to Tantor or I'll go to Podium. Will you get this? Oh, well, we can sort that out. Well, fair enough. Then move on to the next thing. So I was just like, no, I know who I want.
I've never done that.
Really
does have some really good narrators.
And Kate is actually a good drinker as well. At Dragon Point, he continually bought me rum buckets. So, I view anybody that gives me lots and lots of alcohol as a good person.
There you go. No, everybody at Podium that I work with has been super nice. They've just been super polite. They're just really chill people. I think they're from Canada too. Good chunk of them. They're from California,
quite a few of them,
as well,
I think, would. Yeah.
Here and there. But yeah, they've just been super nice. Most of the time with books where I don't like specify exactly what I need for a narrator, I just tell them, hey, I need someone that like fits these criteria, and they'll present you like a list of like 5 or 6 of them, and be like, yeah, pick one of them. It's like, okay, you just find someone whose voice you think fits. It's especially important for like stories in first person, because
we do and we don't, Paul. It's a case of we can just leave the whole thing to the narrating company like Podium. You can just, as he says, just hand the whole thing over and go, there you go, that's it, done. Or you can be more involved and you can say, no, I want this narrator, I want this, I want it to be like this. It's down to personal preference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've known some authors that just like, they don't care about the audio side of it, so they just give it to a company and they let them handle it all. And some are more involved. I tend to be somewhere in the middle. I'll care enough that like if they have a narrator that clearly doesn't sound good, I'll just veto it, and they're usually okay with that. I'll be like, all right, cool. We'll find somebody else. And most of the time, what they do is they give you a list of narrators, and you just listen to them all, and they're like, okay, this person's voice sounds good for the character or whatever. I've been I've been Firefly, sorry, I've been really lucky with like quite a few. Reba as Broccoli from Cinnamon Bun is just I can't unhear Molly's great too. Jackson, I think her family name. And Emma's great too. I've just been really lucky with narrators. They've just been like really fantastic. I should definitely get more of my books narrated. I know I have a Spormageddon coming out soon as an audiobook in August. I got this something that her family name. Her family name is very French sounding. I'd have to look up the email to see what the narrator's family name is. I don't think she's well known. She doesn't have very many like audiobooks out, but her voice was just like, oh wow, her voice sounds like exactly what I pictured the main character sounding. She's got like this really cute British English accent. It's like, okay, that works.
Some people do use the sound effect in it. Alaron, I think, was the first one I'd ever heard. Was sort of his the land founding, I think it was, where it's sort of like ding ding ding, level up and things like that. I found really really weird at first. And Lars has for his Bard series, he has some beautiful violin music in it, and it's when he's playing the violin and you hear the violin being played, and it is wonderful. And then other things, you sort of like ding, he said, like he heard a loud ding, ding, like right.
I'm going to be real honest. Do you listen to a lot of audiobooks?
I used to. When I was welding, I would go through 3 or 4. Yeah, very much.
Yeah,
I would go through 3 or 4 a week easily. Now I go through 1 every couple of months, if that.
Okay. So when I did cleaning work, I had headphones and I'd listen to audiobooks the entire time. So when Podium approached me and they're like, "Hey, have you listened to any of our audiobooks?" I'm like, "Yeah, I've listened to this is like back in 2019 or so. Like I've listened to pretty much everything you've ever published." Yeah. I was looking through their library, like, really? Wow, you've bought a lot of them. Like I haven't bought a single one. But like, let's set aside my piracy. But I was like, yeah, I've listened to them all, but not quite the way you'd want me to get them, because they're just so expensive.
I'm thinking Audible. You just do a membership. But
then Audible's not bad, but it's only 1 book. You burn through that in 1 day.
See, that's the difference. In the UK, we get Audible membership for 3 books.
Oh, okay, that's
so you've got 1, 2, or 3 for obviously a scaling monthly fee. But then all I would do is I'd do 1, 2, 3. I'd listen to those 3 books, and then I would just cancel and rejoin and buy another 3, because it used to be that you couldn't just buy 3 more credits, and I'd be sort of like ringing them up like years and years ago. I'd be ringing up the Audible sort of helpline, just going, look, just cancel my account, restart it, the credit card details, everything stays the same. It's just that I fucking want to listen to more books.
You can buy books directly, but they're like $30-something. Yeah. And when you've got a job where you're making like minimum wage, you're not gonna spend like 4 hours wage on 1 book. It doesn't make sense.
No, for me it was like literally an hour's wage was a book. Well, less than an hour's wage was a book, and that was fine. I didn't mind that when I'm doing like a 12-hour shift.
Yeah,
because
it's not that bad.
Through like 2 shifts or whatever, totally fine. But yeah.
Yeah, this is gonna sound very strange. I still do this to this day. I like listening to the EPUBs. Like I'll buy like a Kindle. I'll strip the DRM and all that and turn it into an EPUB, and then I'll just use the text to speech to listen to it. It's like a robotic voice, and I got so used to that I have a hard time listening to audiobooks now. Like I did that for years. I listened to like a ton of audiobooks, and then I discovered that I couldn't read this one series. I didn't have an audiobook for it. I really wanted to listen to it. Because at the time there was this list, I think it was a New York Times list, of like the top 100 most important fantasy novels. And they did a list of top 100 sci-fi novels. So I read all 100, which took about a year and a half. And some of them are quite long. Some of them I didn't finish because they were awful. But yes, I read all that. And some of them just didn't have audiobooks. So I find an EPUB for them. And I just listened to that with like a robotic voice. And I've grown to really like that. Because the voice has no inflections, no tones or nothing. Yeah. And it's the same as, there's no tones when you're seeing letters, right? On a book.
You add your own, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, you add your own tone in your head. You hear the characters' voices in your head, but you're just reading them. And I've grown used to like just hearing the word. And in my head, I translate it back into reading it.
Yeah.
So when I went from doing that for several years to going back to listening to audiobooks, I had like such a hard time because the narrator is giving personality to the personalities.
Yeah.
Just conflicted with my own mental thing. I don't know. I'm probably broken in the head for that. But yeah,
they've both come.
They've both come.
Yeah. So they've both come to join in tonight. This is Gizzy. So this one is our feral cat, who, she will not allow anybody else in the house anywhere near her, and just hasn't for years. She also is tatty as all hell, but she won't allow me to brush them out. So every so often we have to shave you, don't we?
Mm. What's the other cat's name? Tuxedo.
The other one, this is Martha.
Martha. Okay.
We have Gizzy and Martha, or alternatively Shitbag.
Oh.
They both respond to Shitbag. So generally, when they're doing something they shouldn't, just like shit stick for the dog. Yeah. They're now buggering off. Will there be more Wonderland style stuff for Cinnamon Bun?
Oh, okay. Maybe. The first couple dungeons in Cinnamon Bun were very, very heavily thematic, and I should bring that back. I've done it a little bit with later dungeons, but the first one was like very clearly like the entire dungeon was a reference to Alice in Wonderland. The enemy was the Cheshire Cat. There was a boss. There was the Mad Hatter. So there's like a lot of references to Lewis Carroll's work throughout the entire dungeon. Yeah. Every floor was I think one of like the third floor was like the enemies were cards. They were just walking cards, and it's like stuff like that. And it was kind of fun. It made for like a cool visual type thing. And I did a few other dungeons. I think I did a Lovecraft dungeon. I did a couple of other dungeons themed on older books. I just realized broccoli went down the rabbit hole. Yes, Firefly. That was exactly the pun that kind of started that. So yeah, I had like these really thematic dungeons, which I always liked. But I haven't done too many dungeons lately in Cinnamon Bun. There's been a couple, but they're not as often.
Yeah.
I always think it was French. What's wrong with French? No. But yeah, you mentioned you have one of your stories is a dungeon core story, right?
Yeah.
So that like the main character is a dungeon core, or is in the dungeon, or how is that?
Not exactly. So it's built around the main character gets control of a dungeon core that's implanted in him, and then it's mindless, it's broken, and so he takes it over and he sets up a dungeon as his dungeon when the world has started to go straight into an apocalypse. So all power and everything else is gone, and other dungeons are springing up. It's literally just Earth as it is right now. It's overnight, everything goes wrong, and mana starts to seep back into the world. People go crazy, creatures go mad, and become mana-born, fucking terrible things. It's that way around. It's a bit different to most of the dungeon core ones I'd read. I really liked the idea of dungeon cores, and I wanted to write one, but I didn't think I could. The first one is The Age of Stone, Paul. Thanks, mate. But I didn't believe I could write one because it just didn't work. The dungeon cores I'd read before I really enjoyed, but they didn't really resound with me as something I could write. So I read one called Derelict by Dean Henniger's.
Okay, I've heard of that.
And that was just like, wow, because it was from such a different point of view. And I was like, right, that's it. I can write dungeon core. I want to write dungeon core. And yeah, I did that. So that's now an 8-book series. There's 5 books out so far. With 3 of them are on audio. There's 2 more. One comes out the end of this month. One comes out beginning of September. And the rest will be finished next year. And I made Richard an officer in it. The British Army pissed him off no end because he was always an NCO. So, calling any NCO an officer is a high fucking offense.
I started my own dungeon core story recently. I started one a while ago, and I just got like 5 chapters in, and I realized that I just messed it up. They're tricky. They're kind of bizarre, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know what it is about them, but there's something mechanically bizarre about a dungeon core story that makes them kind of hard to write. So I started another one recently. It's been going pretty well. It's called Cozy Core. I was like, it's not going to be quite as apocalyptic as what you've described. But the idea was basically just a dungeon is born and it wants to be like all powerful. It wants to like take over the world type of thing, and it keeps ending up with like cute fuzzy creatures instead. So it's like hot crap. And then eventually the dungeon core kind of picks up and leaves. It figures out how to travel, which is something I hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, that would be kind of neat to have like a traveling dungeon core that goes like from one place to another and like sets up a dungeon temporarily and then goes to another place and does the same thing. So it's kind of like the dungeon takes over a wagon, basically, like a caravan. It's like, oh, the dungeon uses this mobile caravan thing. And it's going from place to place, and it's basically just acting like a merchant almost. With its goal, Yaga Core. I'm not sure if Yaga Core is an actual story or not, but yes, think Baba Yaga's hut type of thing. I was like, that feels like a cool aesthetic. Just explore and like have the dungeon travel, and like I can do world building on a big scale. I can do like a bunch of cities and different cultures and different peoples and all this, and I can just explore these things through like the dungeon going to, which is I don't know about like you, but one of the things I like writing the most is world building. I love writing when a character arrives in a new city or a new location, and there's just tons of things to explore. Like, hey, here's a culture, and they do this and they do that, and they have like this weird thing that they do, and they eat this and they eat that, and they farm this material, and they get this other stuff shipped from elsewhere, and there's like multiple families and they're feuding, and there's this and that, and like I love that stuff. So I can just do nothing but world building all day. It's my bread and butter. I just love doing that.
Yeah.
So stories like Cinnamon Bun. Cinnamon Bun is like a travel log, right? The character is going from one city to another. Sometimes they loop back, they go back to a place they've been to before, but most of the time they're just traveling. And I have like a really large world map, and you can follow their trajectory across the world map as they're going from one place to another. And it's like, oh, I'm going to go to this town, and we need to go to this city over there. But like on the way, there's like 4 other cities, so we're going to stop there. We're going to like check them out and explore them. Maybe hit up the dungeons that are local to those areas. Talk to the locals, see what's going on. Fix some minor issues, help people, and then move on to the next place. And like as they're traveling, they're getting levels, they're getting experiences and everything. But the main thrust of the story is really the exploration of the wider world, seeing new places, seeing new things, seeing strange people, and I'm just having a blast over here. Just like, hey, I'm building this city. It's going to be like a city like this. It's going to be really cool. I'm going to build like a town, but the town's going to be a bit weird, and they have like their weird customs and everything. They're like, maybe they're not nice to strangers, but like the main character has to negotiate herself. Firefly, yes. That is why I wrote Crystal Genocide the way I did. Crystal Genocide is a very weird story. I'm not sure if I've. Oh boy, I really like magical girl stories, the like Puella Magia type of stuff, Sailor Moon and stuff like that. I really liked them before as a kid, and so I decided, hey, I'm going to write my own. So I started chapter 1 or the prologue by having the main characters blow up Earth in the opening line. Like they accidentally blow up the planet. So they're like, well, we have to fix this. We've accidentally killed off the entire human race, which is a bit of an oopsie, Yeah. It happens. Just
these things happen.
Man. When you're an all-powerful magical girl, sometimes you blow up the planet. So the main thrust of the story is that the main 12 characters, the 12 magicals, they get split apart, and they each end up empowering a magic system on a different world. Yeah. But one of them gets freed, and as she frees herself, they've got like this thing that pulls them back to the next senior magical. So she's the youngest, so she gets pulled to the oldest. And she appears in another world. And that world there has locals and everything. There's a culture in that world. And there's monsters and like everything. And it's a fantasy world. So as she discovers the magic system in that world is operating off of the magic system of her friend.
Yeah.
So the locals are basically stealing like little portions of her friend's magic to empower themselves. And so it's like it's got its own unique magic system, and she has to figure it out. And she figures out, oh, this is actually empowered by my friend. Where is my friend hidden? She discovers that. She frees her friend. They both get teleported to the location of the next friend.
Yeah.
So basically, just an excuse to write 12 different worlds with 12 different magic systems that rely on like 12 different, like the very, very different styles of worlds, right? So the first one's like very typical isekai fantasy style, except the monsters, if you kill them, eat their brain, you gain their power. So it's like very nasty nightmare-based stuff because it's rending nightmares, you know? It's rending nightmares magical world. So it's like, okay, cool. So we see that world. The next world is based on Roadside Picnic, which is this really old Russian story with like horrific artifacts and like messed up time and like fields that if you step into them, you age really quickly. And other places where if you go into them, things are aging backwards. And like there's time bubbles and all sorts of distortions all over the place because the person whose power is being used to empower that world is like another magical girl whose powers are time-based. So it's a really weird idea I had one day. And I was like, oh, this is complicated a little bit. But at the same time, it allows me to write 12 different worlds. With 12 different magic systems that are all basically relying on the same basic principle.
It's like, intriguing, but wow, you like to really give yourself a.
Oh, I don't like writing stuff that's easy.
I mean, I like easy, but Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so when I was writing this, I was like, initially I was like, okay, so I have 12 characters, and they're 12 protagonist style characters, right? They're the main characters of their own story. So I was like, this is really hard to do. Like you know, like me, right? Like when I'm writing a story and I have multiple characters in a room, it's the more characters you have, the harder it is to write.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, you have 2 characters, well, they're talking to each other. You have 3 characters, 2 of them can be talking to each other, or the third one is there interjecting. If you have 12 characters in the room, if things are getting complicated, right? And you can't describe what every one of them is doing. And when you have 12 characters, that each one of them has like planet-destroying levels of power, and it's like, oh, this is really hard. So I decided like what I would do is I would write their origin story, like how they became a magical girl. So I wrote 12 chapters that are basically their origin stories, and then I decided, well, I'm going to expand on that. So I wrote basically their origin story as like a short story. They're like maybe 40,000 words each. And it just shows them like, oh, this is them gaining their power. This is them like going through their first like training and learning how to figure it out. And this is like towards the end or whatever. But they're all in the same world, like just normal Earth. So the first one is Rending Nightmares. She gains powers over nightmares and stuff. So she can make shadows become tangible. She can summon monsters. And she discovers that hell is invading Earth. So she's like, oh, okay, so there's demons invading Earth. I'm going to counter-invade them. And she goes to hell and starts destroying hell. So that's like the first one. It's like, okay, so this is our baseline for strength, is the first ever magical girl goes to hell and gives every demon in hell nightmares at the same time and starts like just murderizing them. So like, yeah, that's our basis for power levels. And we'll just go from there.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, look at so actually genuinely difficult to write because you have to have 12 characters that have 12 unique power sets. And the first 5 or so, very easy, right? But after that, you're like, okay, I have to figure out more powers. and they have to be relatively unique, and they have to be able to scale well. And that's surprisingly difficult. At first, I was like, that's easy. I'll just come up with 12 unique characters. And no, it turned out to be really difficult.
See, for me, writing is a form of therapy. And I need therapy after trying to write that.
Yeah, it was really fun, though. Like, just as a world building exercise, it was never very successful. I knew it wasn't going to be very successful in my commercial because it's just too weird. But still, coming up with like a bunch of different characters, a bunch of different powers, how they interact, like the characters have to be unique. I decided like, I'm not going to set any character in like the United States or like the UK or like a place where you typically have a character come from. So like, no, I'm going to have the characters come from like unique places. So Rending Nightmares from Brazil. I have some family that live in Brazil, so I'd contact them and be like, hey, what's it like living in Brazil? Like, what are some common drinks? What are some common things? Or like, tell me about the location, the seasons and everything. My absolute favorite piece of trivia about the story is that out of all the characters, Rending Nightmare, Fractured Time, Crystal Genocide, the scariest one is Happy Sparkles. Yeah, don't fuck with Happy Sparkles.
Anybody called Happy Sparkles there can only be one of two ways. They're
either
really happy and cheerful, which would be annoying as fuck, or they're insane and highly dangerous, which I would be if I got a name like that.
Yeah. So like the magical girls are I can't list them all. I probably can't. So there's Gravity's Heartbeat, Burning Ultranova, Dimension Death. I actually have the list over here. Hypertense Breakpoint, Silence Annihilation, Phantom Mist, Screaming Bioplague, and Crystal Genocide, and then Happy Sparkles. So don't fuck with Happy Sparkles. Just
never fuck with Happy Sparkles.
Don't mess with Happy Sparkles because her power is probably the scariest of the whole bunch. So yeah, anyway, I had a blast with that story. I was like, okay, I'm gonna have the characters set in different countries. I'm gonna have to research those countries so I can actually set the characters in them and have them have stories that are like unique origin stories that kind of fit the location and everything. So a lot of research, a lot of weird stuff. I knew it was never going to be that popular, but it was just a blast to write. What was your inspiration for Cinnamon Bun? Oh boy. This is a bad story. I've actually told Rhaegar this, so it's not that bad, but still. Are you familiar with Azeroth Healer?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably like maybe the most popular story on Royal Road for quite a while. It's not the most popular story to come from Royal Road. Like now you have He Who Fights with Monsters and a few others that are popular because they kind of went wide. But for a long time, Azeroth Healer was like the popular story. And but I was just starting off on Royal Road. The only story I had posted there was Lovecrafted. I hadn't written anything else for Royal Road. And I read Azeroth Healer, and the entire time I was reading the story, I was like, this is absolute garbage. Like the writing is just so bad. I can do better. I can do better hands down. I can do better with my hands tied behind my back. So why is this story so popular? Of course, I ended up reading the entire story, like 1-point-something million words in like the space of 4 days. So I basically didn't sleep for 4 days as I read his story. I was like, it's bad, but it's also really, really addictive. So I read his story, Azeroth Healer, and I was like, okay, I should have enjoyed this because the writing is not good. But I enjoyed the heck out of it anyway. So what is it in this story that I really enjoyed? So I broke it down. I made a list of the things I liked. And then I read a few more little RPGs, which I'd been following the scene for a while. I'd read The Land and like a lot of the classic Russian little RPGs that came out like forever ago. I'd read a bunch of those, Shaman Quest, whatever it's called. The Way of the Shaman. Is that? Anyway, whatever. So I'd read a bunch of the classic little RPGs and I read a few of the more recent ones. And I said, okay, so I kind of know how these work, but there's a lot of tropes that they all have, right? Like you could make a list of like the common little RPG tropes. So that's what I did. So I took that list and then I decided, well, I'm going to write the exact opposite at any place I can. So male protagonists were the most common. So I was like a female protagonist. violent protagonists that solve all their problems with like punching and killing. I'm gonna write the opposite. I'm gonna write like a pacifist protagonist. Lit RPGs almost have characters that are unhappy to be isekai'd. I'm gonna have the opposite. They're gonna be like super happy that they like appeared in another world. So like the worlds are usually like dark and grim. No, screw that. The worlds are gonna be a nice, happy, fluffy, like super upbeat. The main character usually has like this quest to like save the world. I'm gonna have the main character completely ignore that quest. Just like don't care. I don't. Too bad. I'm gonna do my own thing. I'm gonna go around and have fun. Main characters that are like obsessed with leveling up, and a character that just does not care. One of the most common tropes in the RPGs is to have the main character have some sort of like cheat power, or like not necessarily a cheat power all the time, but like a power that's like very, very strong, right? Like right out the gate. So it's like that's really common trope. Broccoli from Cinnamon Bun has cleaning magic. It allows her to clean things. That's her special power. She doesn't have to change underwear as often because they're clean. Like that's her power. That's good luck. You get cleaning magic, yay! So yeah, that was kind of the inspiration for Cinnamon Bun, was looking at all of these very common tropes and just twisting them on their heads, doing the opposite of them, and then trying to make a coherent story out of that. And it did pretty well. Cinnamon Bun is moderately popular on a few other sites. It's like, yeah, it's cutesy, it's fun, and it has. If you like all those other tropes, then it's not hard to transition from those tropes to Cinnamon Bun, because they're still there, right? All the tropes that you like are there. They're just flipped around. So it makes for a cool kind of like, oh, I've read something really dark and edgy. Well, I'm going to read the exact opposite of that. And it kind of works, I think, ish, more or less. Yeah. At least I find it kind of fun.
I can see it. It just seems so strange. I was going to say it seems so strange, but this is why you wrote it that way. It's deliberate.
Yeah, it's deliberate. I enjoyed writing it that way, and I think people enjoyed reading it because it's got a decent number of faults and everything. And it's just the plot structure is very simple. I stole from like One Piece. Like, I'm just gonna have to travel a lot and visit different places and do some basic world building and like show different stuff and cool things. And it's just a very like the vibes are very good in that story. It's just like, hey, we're gonna go to this other place. We're gonna make friends. And we're gonna see cool things. We're gonna participate in tournaments and do dungeons. And, maybe fight a dragon or something. And we'll just go from there. But then you just do the typical things, but then you twist them around a little bit. In Cinnamon Bun, fairly early on, the main character Broccoli arrives in a town that's getting attacked by a dragon, and she threatens the dragon by telling him that if he leaves the city, she'll tell his mom. But that doesn't happen very often. So she then convinces the dragon, hey, look, we'll help you. Why are you attacking the city? Like, what are your underlying issues? Then she figures out, like, hey, the dragon is, having issues dating. He wants to date a princess and can't figure that out. So, Broccoli helps him figure out how to date girls. So they arrange like a fake date through the city, like, okay, we're going to go to the restaurant to do this, we're going to do that, like a normal date. And we'll figure it out so you can teach the dragon how dating works. And that prevents the town from being eaten by a dragon. And it's so stupid, but it was a ton of fun to write. It's like a more funny version of like what would typically be like a very edgy, dark, grim type of story. It's like no. We'll just make this really comedic and funny, and like just a lot of fun.
Jesus, we view the world so differently. I would never have occurred to me something like that. No, I love it.
I like trying to push boundaries that way.
Yeah.
It's not great for like I probably don't make much money because it's the story beats are so weird, right? That they don't really make sense. But Oh, actually, no, they make sense. But thank you, Frank. But yeah, it's oftentimes it's what I want to read. Right, I'm writing the type of story that I wish I could read. And
a lot of people do. It's a case of you write what you want to read. So
it's like, oh, there's nobody that's written a pacifist lit RPG yet. Oh, okay, well, I'm going to write one then. And it's like, oh, nobody's done this type of thing. Oh, well, I'll do it. Oftentimes, that's just like the entire reason I write stuff. I like how she walked into the undead lord's lair and made friends with all the horrors there. Yeah. Like, no, that's very much a solution way of doing things. It's a solution, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, most of the RPGs, it's like I'm gonna go kill all these things for their experience, and like I'm gonna figure out how to kill everything. And it's like, no. What if we make friends with the bad guys? I'll convince them to be nice. Yeah, I imagine you writing alongside. You get the total opposite views. Yeah, no, I would be.
I'll be honest. It's just totally thrown me there with that. It's just such a strange worldview. It just seems so interesting because it's got my mind working in all these different categories now and just sort of branching out of you could do and you could do it.
I like it when I read stories that I see like, oh, the author clearly put a lot of time and effort into being as creative as possible.
Yeah.
Because when I read a story and it's like typical, like I know what's going to happen, it's like very cliche, I feel very disappointed, right? Like if a lot of the RPGs I see advertised that are like new and whatever, and it's like, oh, Ultimate Death Lord Online. They just picked like 7-8 typical words and smushed them together. Like, you start reading them, you know exactly where they're going to go, you know what's going to happen. And it doesn't feel like there was a lot of creativity pushed into it, right? And it's like, why did you write this if you weren't going to be creative about it?
Yeah.
And I know that's not necessarily fair. Some people write, even if it's not necessarily really creative, just because. Why? Like that they just enjoy that. They don't have to push things too hard, and that's just what they want to read. But that's not an issue. But it's not what I want to read. I want to read stuff that really pushed creativity, pushed things into like a new direction. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing either. Because a lot of times the stories that are the most successful, that are most memorable, are the ones that did something completely new.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that like, oh, I remember that one. This was going to affect me for a long time because it did something that no other story did. Whereas your kind of standard, typical fantasy fare is just, it's been done. It's been done before again and again. Like you're switching out a couple little knobs that you're training them, but you're just writing something that's been written before. And that's something I absolutely don't want to do. So I always try to push things kind of hard to go into like new directions where like I can tell nobody's ever written anything like this before. No, this is new. This is new territory. It's probably not going to do well because it's too weird.
Yeah.
But if somebody does read it, they'll remember it, which is important to me. So I
can see that.
I think that's kind of more or less my philosophy with writing. It's like I'm going to do something original. It's going to be very different.
Yeah. Hey. Sorry, the cat just keeps going mad trying to rub against everything that's going on here.
A lot of stuff like failing the execution. Failing the execution isn't as bad when what you're trying to do is something very different. Because at least then, if you're pushing the limits, or you're pushing the genre into something different, then if you fail in the execution, you're failing the execution, but at least you have the excuse that like, hey, I was trying something completely new. Like that's never been done before. So obviously if I fail, I was pushing, right? Whereas if you're trying to do something that's been done 1,000 times before, and you fail in the execution, well then, yeah, no wonder then you just look bad, right? it's like, crap, you tried to do this thing that's been done before and you didn't do it right. And that's, it's kind of not cool. So it's like, I don't know, I'd have to think of an analogy. It's like trying to make a loaf of bread. If you fail at making a loaf of bread, well, you have the entirety of your human ancestry has made bread before, and you've kind of failed all of them, right? But if you're trying to make like bacon mustard bread and you fail at that, well, at least you failed doing something that was kind of weird and new, right? And if you had succeeded, well, then maybe you discovered some new taste or some new thing that's like kind of interesting. It's a bit of a weird mentality. It's not quite normal, but I think it's worthwhile.
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to quickly just say, I mean, normally we try and keep these to under 2 hours because Geneva, who's with us in the background running things, has her own life as well. So I mean, taking up all of her time with these.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
What I like to do though, before we sort of we start to draw it to a close, is two things, if that's all right with you. This is what I prefer to do with them. Is first of all, is there anybody that you feel in the genre that doesn't get enough attention? That this can be somebody that, that's just starting out. It could be somebody that's really big. It could be a major author that you just want to talk about, that you go, hey, I really enjoy this book and I want to talk about it. I want to tell people about it because you might not know about this book. I mean, there's a million different people out there that deserve a bit of recognition. So is there anybody that you'd like to tell everybody about that you'd like to recommend?
Actually, two people come to mind, like off the top of my head. One of them is a fellow called Emergency Complaints. This is his handle on Royal. Really nice guy, super chill. He's done a bit of beta reading for me in the past, and he's just been trying really hard. Like I've looked at his stuff. This guy is just working his butt off, trying really hard. I'm not sure if his writing skills are like at 100% yet, but I've seen him getting a lot better over time. And like you can tell when somebody has like a lot of potential and have a lot of talent. And he's got that. He just hasn't had like a breakthrough yet.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be one of those people that like in 5 or 6 years you can look back and be like, oh yeah. He wrote this one story and this other story, and then he got better. He got good. So he's one fella. Really nice guy too. Super chill. Who else? Another person I feel doesn't get. So I've been following on Facebook, right? I've been looking at the Facebook, and I've noticed that the stories that get recommended on Facebook and the stories that get recommended on, say, like subreddits and Discords are not the same. Right? There's like almost two entirely different worlds in the little RPG community, and you have the Reddit world and the like Discords and like the patrons is over here, and then you have the Facebook is like over there. And the Facebook stories that get recommended, some I see recommended often, never heard of them. And I'm in like, I've been deep into the little RPG world, and some of these stories I've never heard of. It's like, oh, how did that happen? So I'll recommend a few people from like the Discord side of things that like they're pretty common there, but you never hear about them on Facebook. Like Thundermoon. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of them. No? They wrote this story called Vigor Mortis. It seems like it's a very cute, wholesome story. They write some of the best body horror and just plain like psychological horror that I've ever seen. Like genuinely chilling stuff that makes like the style that they're written in makes it feel like, oh, this is the sweetest, cutest, fluffiest stuff ever. But it's very much not. I can say cat. There we go. That's Emergency Complaints. So they write like really fantastic stuff. That's something who's Natalie something or other. I can't remember their actual name. They do sell stuff on Kindle. Another one that I don't see recommended often is Hesketh. She's just really sweet. She writes this story called Witches Get Stitches. It's just this really cute story about this witch that becomes a lich, and she has bad neighbors. She just kills them. Anyway, no, it's just a really fantastic kind of like, oh, we're gonna have tea and crumpets and like deal with the Lord of the Undeath later type of story. It's very reminiscent of like what's his name, Pratchett type of style of story, where it's like it's got these comedic moments and it's like it's very sweet and like the prose is really pretty. So you don't see them get recommended too often either, but they're a lot of fun.
This is one of the reasons that I wanted to have you come on and talk about it, because it's a case of we started this group primarily to try and draw attention, because in the Lit RPG authors groups and in the Lit RPG general groups, we found that there were so many authors coming through at the moment, but so many big guys that are out there that are essentially like, when they release, that's it, everything. Like Will White, when he releases, everything's full of Will White is releasing this. One, wow, fantastic. But then if, Bob Jones releases his first book and it comes out the day after Will White is released, you just
nothing.
So it's a case of a lot of these authors just aren't getting attention. So we were saying, well, what could we do? We could try and draw attention to it in the group, and this is why we do this. Why we talk at the end and we say, what about this? So, I mean, if there's somebody else that you think we should have on, that we should talk to, feel free to. We'll talk about this later on anyway ourselves. Recommend, and I'll bring them on, and we'll get them into the.
Yeah, well, I know some authors that are really good at like interviewing stuff because they just have like these interesting perspectives. Rhaegar, who wrote Azumarill, super chill guy, has like the best voice. He was my DM for a while, and he just has like this really chill voice. He's like from somewhere in Europe, I don't know, but anyway, super chill guy, has like this very unique perspective on how to write and how to do things, and like his perspective on like the actual art of writing is quite unique, and he's just really fun to chat with. Selkie Myth, who wrote Beneath the Dragon Eye Moons, he's pretty popular though. He's relatively well known, but also just a really sweet guy who's just really nice. But he goes like really deep into the mechanics of things, and he just loves that stuff. And once you get him started on that, he'll keep going for a while. So he's fun to chat with. He knows a lot of people as well, so he's kind of tied into a lot of groups and stuff.
See, I find these quite funny because some of the conversations we have on here, sometimes it's like when talking to Chatfield or Brian, and it's essentially we're almost doing shots. We're just sort of talking, hey, do you remember then? Oh, we did this. And it's very, very jokey. It's very like, we're all having great fun. And then other times we're talking about therapy and about the need for therapy and why writing is so good and why we were physically broken, we were mentally broken, that brought us to writing. Sometimes the conversations are literally about the business of writing. And we're talking about it as a business. And it's good. It's good to talk about it all the way around. It's good to get to know each other better with these things.
We need to we don't need to let people know, but there are some gems out there. There are some stories out there that are fantastic. They're beautiful.
Definitely.
But you'll never hear about them because the author doesn't have the right contacts. They don't have the right friends. They don't have the right marketing talents behind them. They haven't had time to build a community. They were too late. That one hurts. But sometimes you publish something and you miss the bandwagon. Like, sorry, you published a story that's like in a certain genre, a certain style, but
3 years ago, magnificent. But now
this would have been popular 6 months ago, especially to speed things move at nowadays, like different genres. This would have been super popular a few months ago, but you missed out. Sorry. So, despite your work being fantastic or beautiful or like gorgeous or whatever, it's not going to go anywhere. Sorry, you missed out. And that's a shame. And it's like, crap, the people who enjoy reading are missing out on something incredible because of pure happenstance, just pure bad luck. And it happens to everybody, right? Like, trust me, I've published a lot of stories, and sometimes it's just a bad luck. And sometimes it's like, I know the story, the market would love this story. I published it a week too early or a week too late. And it's like, okay, no, sorry. There was like another big story that came out at about the same time. So, no, not good. Sorry, you missed out. And it just happens, and you can't predict it sometimes.
Very, very true.
You're welcome.
Very true.
Enjoy them. Don't read Vigor Mortis at night. you'll have nightmares.
Hey, it's all good fun, though, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I'm not a big horror person, but I really enjoyed their work.
Well, I'm gonna have to look those ones up as well because I'm really curious now. But there are some wonderful stories out there, and they do get missed very easily just because of blind luck.
Yeah.
And so that's
and some stories become successful, and you read them, and you're like, why? I'm not going to name names because that would be rude. But some stories become really successful, and then you actually like, oh, what? This is actually really popular. You pick them up, you read them, and you're like, they did nothing original, and they did nothing special, and it's like, how did this specific story end up blowing up, right? And it's like, oh, okay, maybe they just had really good marketing behind it. Maybe they just had the right context or whatever, and they passed that bar of quality where it's like, that's good enough, and it happened to do like one thing really originally, or it had like a really great premise, but nothing like incredible besides that, and that just happened to be enough to catch enough attention for it to blow up. And as an author, that can be really disappointing because you look at something, it's like, oh, this story blew up. Is it better than what I wrote? And it's like, maybe, maybe not. And it can be really stressful, especially if you're new as an author, and you don't yet have the patience, the time. You haven't failed enough to get used to failure. And then
try being married.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay. Once you've had enough stories that have flopped, you kind of get used to like, okay, well, some of them are going to do well, and some of them are not, and you just kind of live with it. And yeah, you get used to the idea, like, not just because I've put a lot of effort into something doesn't mean it's going to do well. That sometimes you're going to have like a shitpost idea at 4 a.m. and you're going to write it down, and it's going to do super well. And it's like, oh, okay. There's no predicting it.
There isn't, unfortunately. There's a lot of things that come into the actual overall of it. And as you say, some of it is timing, some of it is luck, some of it is just the fantastic story. Some stories I've read, you go, well, if this was releasing now, it's been out for a while, it would probably have just been, averagely popular.
A lot in lit RPG, you see it a lot. Like, I don't want to like call anybody out, but a lot of the big stories in our genre, I think if they were to come out today, they wouldn't make a splash. And they became big because when they came out, they did something new. They were like the first time that somebody did this specific thing. And it was like, oh, that's cool and interesting. But since then, other people have done the same thing better. But because they were the first, they had that first mover advantage. They're just more popular. They kept that momentum going,
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. That can be very frustrating if you're trying to break into the genre and everything, because others have had that advantage that you're never ever going to be able to get yourself. So it's like
it is, but our own author who wrote a world about gender roles reversed as a joke and became 10 times popular as a serious story. They put a lot of effort into. Yeah. But just to say, sort of on the alternative of this, if anybody that's listening this, watching this, that is starting out, that is, just plodding along, however your life is, you don't be disheartened by this. We're talking about like, oh well, if you don't do it right straight away, if you haven't got the first release in this thing, you're knackered. No, seriously, you have a very, very good chance of doing fantastic things. I read books on a regular basis that are from first-time authors, and some of the plots, some of the plans are fucking amazing. And I love some of these books, I really do. So don't feel disheartened about it. Look at the way things are going. Yes, there's a lot more competition out there than there was 3, 5, 10 years ago. But you've got opportunities now that weren't there 10, 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Do it.
And
if you feel a need to write, if you want to write, do it, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, write for the love of writing first, before you write for the love of the attention.
And also write for the love of money. Write for the love of money as well.
Yeah, maybe do 50-50, like I said, one for me, one for the type of thing. Write one story for the sake of making money, and write the other story for the sake of for your own enjoyment of writing. I find that that's a pretty important balance to have.
But when you write sort of 7 books in a week, yeah.
It's like maybe 4 for me, 3 for thee type of thing, or maybe the other way.
Yeah. It's insane. I'm still shocked over the way you're doing that. Right, then, I'm afraid we're going to have to call it that. I mean,
that was a lot of fun, though.
Talking to you. I mean, I'm sorry that we're going to have to call it because
I am absolutely famished, so it's all good.
Sorry, I mean, it's after 11 here at night.
No.
Fast asleep above us here, and the cats are going nuts trying to get out. Dog's going nuts because he needs a loo. But no, it's been really good talking to you. So thanks for coming.
I am fun. Thank you.
Cancel last time because myself and my wife were both ill. So
I heard about that.
But at least we got you on eventually, and we got to have a proper chat. So thank you.
Yeah.
So, are there any last questions before we both fuck off?
I don't think so. I just hope you guys have a really nice day, nice evening, and thank you everybody for showing up. That was a lot of fun. Thanks for the good questions too.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you all, guys. We'll say good night.
All right.
Bye.
Good night.